Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Dr. Muhammad Imran. Today we'll discuss language change and language contact in the subject World Englishes. World Englishes is one of the branches of applied linguistics. It is widely taught at BS level as well as at MS level. Lot of research is being carried out in the subject World Englishes because it is comparatively a new branch of applied linguistics. So in this lecture, first we will discuss what is language change, and then we will explore the causes of language change. Next, we will discuss what is language contact and what are the various levels or degree of language contact. So let's begin and learn our today's topic. Lexical change. As we are talking about language change, so the first part consists of lexical change. So when we say lexical change, so we are talking about vocabulary, right? So might be that a word did not exist in the past and now that word exists in a language. Fine? So language change all the time, whether we like to or not. So it's not an our whims or desire that if you want, so language will change, and if you don't want, so language won't change. No. If there is a language, so ultimately it will change. There'll be change in vocabulary, there'll be change in pronunciation, there'll be change in grammar, there'll be change in syntactic structures, and in all aspect of that language. So it's not in our control. We can't control this change. Second, that sometimes we are aware of this language change and sometimes we are not. So, in the case of vocabulary or in the case of lexical change, we are aware because how we are aware, a word might not existed in the past, but now that word exists. For example, the word Google did not exist in the past and now it exists. The word Facebook did not exist in the past and now it exists. So we are aware of this change in a language. These are new words, new vocabulary in a language. But sometimes we are not aware of this change. That is in the case of pronunciation. We are not. So we will discuss this on coming slide. So lexical innovation, fashion word of the year, in fact all computer technology words, etc. So these are the causes of lexical change because we are living in 21st century, in the century of information technology, internet, computer technology, advancement in medical, advancement in technology. So we are seeing that everywhere there is advancement in all fields of life. So because of internet, because of computer, so there are hundreds of words which did not exist in the past and now they exist. So that is because of the invention of internet and because the invention of computer. For example, focus these three words: browser, mouse, and downloading. So the word downloading and the word browser, when you browse something on internet, online, or when you download something from YouTube, from Instagram, from Facebook, or from any other platform. So the word downloading, the word browser, they did not exist 35 years ago. Similarly, the word Instagram, the word Facebook, the word Twitter, right? And similarly, You see that not just the names of different apes, but the language used inside in these apes, okay, by the youngster, by the internet user. So these all words did not exist some 30, 25, or 30 years ago, but now they do exist. So this is a language change, and this is a language change, and this language change is referred to lexical change. Now see, there is another word, mouse. Perhaps in the past, people thought that mouse is referred to a small gray animal. But now, mouse is also referred to a pointing or a clicking device that is attached with your laptop or with computer. So see that the meaning of the mouse that now we are using, okay, a clicking or pointing device, did not exist in the past. So this is also the example of lexical change. Now, pronunciation changes. As I told on previous slide, that sometimes we are not aware of. So when we are not aware of the change, so this is pronunciation changes. We are usually not aware of pronunciation and grammar changes. So both, sometimes we are not aware. Later on, we get awareness of this change. But at the time, they are changing, so we are not aware of them. So they do exist, and we do realize and notice when time gap become wider. So we notice there is a change in pronunciation. We realize, excuse me, we realize there is a change in grammatical structure. But when the time gap become wider, after 200 years, after 300 years, after 400 years, so then we realize, oh, the word was pronounced in that age in this manner. But now it is totally pronounced differently. Oh, this structure was used in 16th and 17th century, but this structure is used differently today. So when the time gap become wider, then we realize. Otherwise, we are not aware of this change at the moment. So see, for example, Beowulf, Chaucer, and Shakespeare. If you pick up Beowulf, which was perhaps written in 8th century. So if you pick up Beowulf in Chaucer time, in the Middle Ages, so you will realize, oh, there was so much big change in 8th century in grammatical structure, okay, and the way the spellings were written that time in 8th century, and the way the words they pronounce in that time. So now in Chaucer time, in the Middle Age, because there's a huge gap, 8th century, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So almost 600-700 years later, we realize, oh, this structure is quite different that is used in the 8th or 9th century. Oh, the word that is pronounced in the Middle Ages was pronounced differently in that time. Oh, okay. So we realized in later on. Similarly, that if you pick up Shakespeare play, and you plays are not to be read, okay, but we also read plays. So if you pick up Shakespeare plays and you start to read, oh, you realize, oh, the structure Shakespeare is using, this structure did not exist in Chaucer time, in the Middle Ages, because Shakespeare is writing in the 16th century, and that was a modern age, the beginning of our modern world. And then you see, oh, that the word is pronounced now. It's quite differently than the people pronounce in 14th century. So I mean that there is also change in pronunciation. There is also change in grammatical structure. There is also change in graphology, the way spellings, okay, punctuation, These are related to grammar. So we see that the changes also exist at this level also. But sometimes we are not aware of this change, and we notice, we realize later on when the time period become a wider one. Oh, okay. I hope you got it. Now we have more some practice here and discussion, pronunciation changes. Now see this pronunciation changes as well as some grammatical structure changes on this slide. Ongoing changes in English speaking world in recent decades, the use of quotative. Now, especially the form of be like to introduce direct speech. Let me first discuss. Like before 1980, right, when you were introducing a direct speech, so you would say that he says, okay, or she says, or you would write that he said and she said, and then you would put something in quoted marks if that was a direct speech, right? He said and then quoted mark, and then you would put something inside. Okay, for example, if I say that he said he was busy, or she said quoted mark she was upset. So this is a direct speech. But now in the later 1980s, what happened? Youngster American started to use the structure be like instead of he said and she said. So American in the later 1980s said instead of he says that he is like to. She says she is like to. He said he was like to. She said she was like to. They said they were like to, and then something in quoted mark. For example, he was like to. He was ill. In quoted mark, you're writing he was ill. So instead of he said, she said, he says, they say, they said, American started to use that he is like to, he was like to, they were like to. So that was a change in structure. Fine. Now this is the explanation. In conversation 3 decades ago, people use words I said and then quoted mark, and he said and then quoted mark. Nowadays, young people, particularly female in lead, use I was like. Okay, I was like. You can see here, and then putting something into quoted mark. And you can see that instead of she said or he said, to introduce direct speech. So this usage was introduced in the US in 1980s. That is the form be liked. Okay, he was like, she was like, like this. Now, causes of language change. What are the causes of language change? So the first cause of language change, that is social cause. So there might be, we have different classes in our society: upper class, middle class, lower class, working class, and then we can see educated class, uneducated class. right? So sometime we are going to show sympathy with them, okay, and or show harmony with them. So this will lead to a language change because we have different uh, classes in our society, right? Some might be highly educated, some might not be. Some might be living in rural area, some might be living in urban area, right? So this is because of social society. So language learning component play a vital role in language change, right? How? Like many of the newer Englishes are the product of individual and group of second language acquisition. So if you, because we see that new Englishes or world Englishes, so many variety of English, of British English. So that is usually that is because of second language acquisition or second language teaching, right? If you're going and you are acquiring English as a second language, so this would also lead to change in a language because you have already one language in your hand and that goes side by side with the English language. So when you are acquiring an English language and you have already another language, so this would lead to a language change. Now, language contact. What is language contact? Most nations have a national language and every speech community has a distinctive language or dialect. I talk about myself. I have a national language, that is Urdu. And where I live, that is Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Where my speech community, they speak Pashto. And then inside Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, we have different dialects. Yusufzai dialect, Khattak dialect, and Banuchi dialect, and so many other dialects. So, furthermore, that in most countries people speak more than one language. That's called bilingual or multilingual. So see that we can hardly find a person that who can speak one language. You see that most often we see that people speak two or more than two languages. If you speak two or more than two languages, so then you are called a bilingual or a multilingual, right? So you might not be proficient in these two languages, okay, well proficient. In one language you might be well proficient compared to the other one, but at least you can understand and you can speak two languages. So when a new variety of English is introduced in many contexts, it's not context, many contexts, fine, introduced in many contexts, so the new variety in a context, new variety in a context with the language or language side by side, this phenomena is known as language contact. Now let me give an example. For example, I am acquiring a second language, but I have already in my hand Urdu language. So sometime I might need a word because I'm living in a different culture. And the word might not exist in an English culture. It exists in my culture. So I'll borrow from Urdu language. I'll borrow from Pashto language. Similarly, that I have already acquired Urdu or Pashto language. And if I am acquiring English language, so there'll be impact of my Urdu pronunciation on English. So my Urdu language will affect English, and English will also affect my Urdu and Pashto language because these two languages will be in contact with each other, right? So whenever you are acquiring an English language, so already you have in hand your mother tongue, your national language, right? So that is in your mind. So sometimes you give a local touch to English language. Most often we see. You might have noticed you see that he speaks English in Punjabi, right? He speaks English in Farsi, and she speaks English in Pashto. Sometimes we say because that is the local touch, pronunciation, okay, or accent of your language that affect English language. And sometimes you see that when we speak Urdu language, and because we also have acquired English, so that English language will affect, uh, you see, the accent of my Urdu language, okay, or pronunciation of my Urdu or Pashto language. So these two languages will affect each other. Now, this language contact influence each other in many ways, like uh, grammar level, pronunciation level, accent level, vocabulary level, and so on. Now, one of the main consequences of language contact is the result of borrowing or transfer. So we borrow or we transfer, okay, words from one language to other. Sometimes we borrow a word from Urdu and we insert in English language. And sometimes we borrow or transfer a word from English and we insert in Urdu or Pashto because the word might not exist in our language. Okay? Or this might be the invention of that culture. So we borrow word from that language and we insert in another language. Word sounds, even structure pattern that we transfer and we borrow. So standard English in ways is mixed language of Germanic origin. We know that English has Germanic origin, okay, but with strong contact and influence from French language, because French also invaded England. And then we see that Latin, Scandinavian, and Lord words. Sorry, that's not Lord. Loan. Borrow words from many other languages of the world. So English, what we call BBC English, or Queen English, or Standard English, is a mixture of so many other languages, right? Germanic tribe, its origin is in Germanic tribes, and contact and influence from French, from Latin, Scandinavian, borrow words from Arabic language, from Urdu language, from Hindi language, and from Spanish, from so many other languages of the world. Now it became a standard language. The same applies to the new Englishes of Africa and Asia, which tend to have been shaped to some extent by contact with the indigenous tongues of the region, which are also normally the home languages of their respective speakers or their ancestors. Right? So, if you if you notice that new Englishes in Africa and Asia, in Pakistan, in India, in Singapore, right? Asian country, as well as in Africa, which tend to have been shaped to some extent by contact with the indigenous tongues of the region. Because in India, we spoke Urdu in the past, and we spoke Hindi. In Pakistan, still we speak Urdu, and in India, they speak Hindi. In Bangladesh, they speak Bengali. Right? So these are Asian countries. So English was in contact with these indigenous languages. Okay? So that's why the new Englishes have the local touch or the touch of the indigenous people of this region, which are also normally the home languages of their respective speakers or their ancestors. Who are their ancestors? In the past, okay, our forefathers, they also spoke English language because in colonization time. Okay, when different parts of Asia and Africa were the colonies of Great Britain. Now, degrees of language contact. There are so many degrees of language contact. Okay, superficial one, okay, a strong one, and more strong one. So, language contact come in different degrees of intensity, and this incline of contact intensity correlate with specific linguistic effects. Light superficial contact, let's say, of one culture admiring and being influenced by another results in lexical borrowing. You admire another culture, okay? You like another culture, and you borrow some words from that culture. So that would be a superficial contact or light one. The next one, more intense forms. For instance, when a minority population lives in a majority territory. Okay, let's say, for example, that a group of people from Pakistan, from Africa, from India, they go and they live where? In United States of America, or they live in Great Britain. Or a group of people from Britain, Great Britain, or from America, they come and they settled in our country, right? So what happened? That is minority in majority territory. Produce structural interference. So there will be structure. The structure of one language will interfere the structure of another language. Some changes in morphology and syntax can be also found if minority people they live in majority. And very intense contact when two people living together very closely, frequently in an equal power relationship may end up in a birth of new language system, truly mixed languages or Pidgin and Creole, right? So they say that when two people living together very closely and their status that is unequal, okay, one has a very high social class, one is low social class, one is superior, one is inferior, right? So this will end up to a new language system, and truly first that language will be a Pidgin and later it become a Creole language. So thank you so much. It was all about what is language change and what is language contact in the subject world Englishes. Please do provide your valuable comment in comment section. Thank you so much.